Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at what mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today, just like the other day, we've got a lot of extinct animals. We've got a few extinct animals. We've got a couple birds, and we've got a couple monkeys, and an ungulate. So very interesting assortment today. So we're going to be starting off with by Elijah Planet Zoo, or Eliza. We have got the black-necked stilt. So let's have a look at these wonderful guys here. This is the black-necked stilt. So this is the black-necked stilt, or Hematopus mexicanus. These guys are a type of shorebird from North and South America, and they're typically found around wetlands and coastlines, and can be found pretty much from the coastal areas of California through much of the interior western US, around the Gulf of Mexico and Florida, and down into Central America, the Caribbean, Brazil, Peru, and the Galapagos Islands. And even there is an isolated population that's considered different subspecies, the Hawaiian stilt, as you could find in Hawaii. So it's really cool. So as I mentioned, it was described in 1776 by as Cadlenus mexicanus by the German zoologist Philip Status Müller, but then it was moved into Hematopus in basically 1760. And while this guy is sometimes considered a member of the black winged stilt, or a subspecies, at the moment they're often considered their own sort of population or own species, with three different subspecies, kind of the Hawaiian one, Mexicanus, and Melurus, which is found in the southern areas around there, like Peru and stuff like that. So yeah, these guys are very interesting. They get to about 13 to 15 centimeters or 13 inches in length, are about 35 to 39 centimeters. They have a weight of about 5.3 to 6.2 ounces, or about 150 to 180 grams. And they have a wingspan of about 28 to 29.7 inches, or about 71 to 75 centimeters as well. As you can mention, they have got the name the stilt, so they've got very long legs. They've got very long pink legs and a long, thin black bill. They are white, but have back and black wings and back. The tail is white with some grey banding, and the continuous area of black extends from the back along to the hind neck and the head, and they kind of form a cap of the entire head that's just below eye level, with the exception of a small white area there. So that's kind of where they get the name the black neck stilt compared to the wing stilt. Down to young, you can see they look very different. You can see the very light colours there. Let's see how cute they are. Oh, and, of course, it doesn't quite work out. So another olive colour there with black speckles, which is for camouflage. And when they're the black wing stilt and the black neck stilt and kind of integrate, they do sometimes create hybrids. So they can be kind of often have some white or grey on the top of the head, or a white or grey collar. But the black neck stilts are still distinguished from non-breeding vagrants of the black wing stilt by the white spot above their eye, so you can tell the two species apart, which is very interesting as well. So in terms of their distribution, as I mentioned, they can be found in estuarine, kind of lakeshorine, salt ponds, and emergent wetland habitats. So basically any decent watery habitats that can be found. They're generally a lowland bird, but in Central America have actually been seen at 8,000 to 2,000 feet, or 2,500 meters, and commonly seen in the llanos habitat in northern South America. And they can also be found in seasonally flooded wetlands. And the use of salt evaporation ponds have actually increased significantly, and that's actually probably one of their more wintering habitats. In some areas up north, they tend to kind of winter in, Florida and California, and then they migrate to places like Oregon and the Colorado River, where they breed up in the sort of, in the summer. So they are, when in the northern parts of their range, they tend to be migratory, more southern parts they tend to just hang around year round. So they also breed in northern California and southeastern Oregon along the Colorado River. In North America, outside California, they rarely breed inland, but are known as a breeding bird in the riparian locales of Arizona. So that's quite cool as well. Fall migration for northerly birds takes place about July to September, and then return to the breeding grounds against March and May. So it's kind of how it happens there. So usually entire population breeding at this one site arrives, mates incubates eggs for about a month and protects the brood until they're capable of flying for about 2 months, and then they leave again and migrate as well. So it's very cool. In terms of how these guys feed, very similar to most other stilts. They primarily probe or glean in mud flats and lake shores, as in also very shallow water, where they feed on a bunch of small invertebrates, such as crustaceans like shrimp, amphipods like worms and flies, and mollusks, but they'll also eat small fish, tadpoles, and plant seeds very rarely. Their mainstay food kind of depends on where they are, and they're pretty generalist in that regard. And in terms of breeding, so how they breed is that they still sorry, I'm just going to look at the babies now because going to have a look at the babies now. So they still choose mud flats and levees and stuff for the nest locations as long as the soil is fillable. Reproduction occurs from late April through August in North America, with peak activity in June, with tropical populations usually breeding after the raining season. The nests are typically within 1 kilometre of a feeding location, and the pairs defend an extensive perimeter around groups of nests, patrolling in cooperation with their neighbours. The spacing of these nests are approximately 65 feet or 20 metres, but sometimes can be within 7 feet or 2 metres of each other in some nests in the rockery, or as far apart as 40 metres or 130 feet. The black-necked stilt is actually classified as semi-colonial, since the nest can really be found alone in colonies who number a dozen, rarely hundreds of pairs, which is sometimes a little bit more common. We'll actually have a look at you because you're kind of not floating. The nests are frequently established rather close to the water's edge, so that the integrity is affected by rising water levels of pools or tides. And this is particularly a hazard in the case of imagined salt ponds, where water levels may be rapidly, in that process as well. So the clutch size itself is roughly about 3 to 5 eggs, and with an average of 4. And for 22 to 26 days, both sexes take turns incubating the eggs. The young are so precocial, so they're basically born ready to go. They can be seen swimming within 2 hours of hatching, and are capable of rapid land velocity at an early time. In spite of this early development, the young normally return to the nest for resting for 1 or 2 more days. They fledge in about a month, but remain dependent on their parents for a few more weeks, and breeding will typically begin at ages of 1 or 2 years. So that's quite cool as well. So we'll find someone else to look at. Very, very cool. Anyway, so we'll talk about the conservation status. So they are considered, I believe, least concern, depending on who you ask, because they're still considered sometimes different species, or the same species as a black-winged stilt. Particularly the North American populations have somewhat declined, mainly due to the conversion of their habitat for human use and pollution, affecting both the birds directly as well as their food. But altogether, they're thought to be healthy and occur over a large range. So they're classified as the species of least concern by the IUCN. The Hawaiian stilt, though, which is occasionally separated as a different species, is very rare, with numbers numbering less than 2,000, and predation by the small Indian mongoose, which has been introduced to hunt rats, is suspected to have contributed to this decline in the Hawaiian stilt. So that's very, very tragic. But yeah, really cool. It was done by ElessarPZ Zoo, did a really great job. So next up, we've got by Great Cakes Mods, we've got another really cool bird, an even more endangered bird. This time, we've got the barley myna. So let's have a look at these guys here. Very, very pretty birds. So this is the barley myna, also known as the Rothschild's myna, or basically the barley starling, which is Leucosper rothschildi. So these guys were formally described in 1912 by German ornithologist Erwin Strissmann, based on a female specimen collected from Bali. He introduced a new genus, Leopusta, and coined the binomial name Lepocusta rothschildi. The genus name means basically white starling, and the species name honors Walter Rothschild, who had allowed Strissmann to examine the birds in his museum in Turing, Herefordshire, in England. And there remains the only species of the genus, and they seem to be closely related to the Barmani starling. But so that's quite interesting as well. But maybe the genus itself might be highly paraphyletic, so there'll probably be some changes there in the future. So in terms of their description, you can see the barley myna is actually quite a big, it's about medium to large. about 25 centimeters or about 9 inches or just under 10 inches in length. It's almost wholly white with a long drooping crest that you can see going on there, black wingtips and tail tips, so you can see pretty much white. It has a brown bill and yellow bill and a blue bare skin around its eyes and legs. The sexes are quite similar in appearance, but the main difference is that the males have a longer crest than the female, and the black-winged myna, which is a similar species, has a shorter crest and much other area on the back of the wings, but thus the yellow eye ring without feathers and legs, so that's how you kind of tell them apart. But these guys are wholly white. So these guys have a very small range. Their modern range is now restricted to northwest Bali and offshore islands in Indonesia, where they're the only endemic vertebrate species from the area. And in 1991, the bird was designated the faunal emblem of Bali and featured in the Indonesian 200 rupiah coin. The local name is the Jakabali. So these guys have a very interesting conservation story that we'll get into soon. Their native habitat is inconspicuous, using treetops for cover, and unlike other starlings, they usually come to the ground only to drink or find nesting material, which seems to be an adaptation to its notability to predators. So since they're white, they're pretty obvious. The Bali myna often gathers in groups when it's young to better locate food and watch out for predators, and the variety of vocalizations is a variety of sharp, pattering calls and an emphatic tweet. And their diet includes fruits, seeds, worms, and insects. During the breeding season, which is the raining season in Bali, males will attract females by calling loudly and bobbing up and down, and they nest in tree cavities with the female incubating. Let's see if we can find a baby. There's probably one there. With incubating 2 or 3 eggs, with both males and females bringing food to the nest to the chicks after hatching. So even though they look quite a cool bird, a lot of people agree with that, and they're actually considered critically endangered, one of the rarest birds in the world. So the Bali myna is actually considered critically endangered, and the wild population has been close to extinction since the mid-90s in 1994. And as of 2015, less than 100 individuals are assumed to exist in the wild, with about 1,000 living in captivity. The Bali myna is listed as Appendix 1 on CITES, and trade even in captive bred specimens is very strictly regulated, and the species is not generally available legally to private individuals. However, experienced aviculturists may be affiliated with captive breeding programs, allowing them to legally keep the species. The number of birds brought on the back market is estimated to be twice as much, or twice the number of legally acquired individuals through the captive breeding program. And in 2018, there were actually 3 locations where the birds exist in the wild: the West Bali National Park, Bali Small Island of Nusa Penida, and the Bigger One Foundation's breeding and release site for Melina Calabon Paragan. And the Bali myna breeding program, there is a small breeding program going. There is a breeding loan that involves 12 breeders who each receive 15 males and 15 female myna birds from the Association of Starling Conservationists in Bogor, West Java. As collateral, each breeder must put up a cow in case all the birds die, and the breeders are obliged to release 10% of the brood into the West Bali National Park, and the rest can be sold off privately. There is 1 pair of Bali mynas in the National Aviary of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, as part of the Species Survival Program. So even though they want people, you've got to make money and sell them, there is some of them have to be donated back into the wild, because, we don't want them going extinct. As they're beautiful birds, we don't want them going extinct. Another really cool population is a population now exists on the island of Nusa Penida, in the sisters island Nusa Selondon and Nusa Lembongan, which is about 14 kilometers off the southeast coast of Bali. And they have been transformed, islands have been transformed into an unofficial bird sanctuary by Friends of National Parks, and which is an Indonesian NGO based in Bali. And this was achieved by the group working for many years with the 40-plus islanders and persuading every villager to pass a traditional Bali's village regulation to protect the birds and effectively removing the threat of poachers. So they're protected by the local people. They begun its starling breeding program in 1999 with 2 pairs, and the population has grown. In 2005 was 97. A release program was started with 64 individuals released between 2006 and 2007, and monitoring suggests that the number had increased to over 100 birds by 2009. And actually had spread across the areas, and some had spread to the other islands as well. A number of further captive breeding individuals have since been in the wild, including 6 individuals in the nearby area, and the foundation expects to release at least 10 minor a year. And the birds will continue to be sourced by different breeders to increase genetic diversity, and people watching it so far. And however, according to an audit, suggests less than 15 birds were seen flying in the wild. So a lot of people are like, maybe they're not actually that many. Calculations undertook suggest in 2015, even with natural predation and death of wild birds, are accounted to be at least 200 birds flying there today, indicating that the illegal wildlife trade is heavily impacting this population. So that's actually been an issue with Indonesia for a little while. They were talking about how the rhinos were doing well, but actually, the Javan rhino is actually probably a lot more endangered than we thought. But yeah, I guess it's just that's the reporting as well. So in Sinabang, Central Bali, in 2010, it was actually a decision to move all cats captive breeding starlings from Nusa Penida to Sabang near Ubud. The breeding program that recommended with the aim to release research new release sites close by, and during 2011, about 23 Bali starlings were donated to the BF's breeding program. And these birds were donated by Jurong Bird Park, when 20 came from a variety of zoos across Europe, members of the European Endangered Species Program, whose contributions to the birds meant that new genetic lines would be introduced, where the imported birds were paired up with local birds to help with the breeding centre in Bali. In November 2012, they released 4 pairs of these starlings to a site in Sabang, and the birds were observed in their daily habits recorded by the staff, and a program of conservation was undertaken with the local villagers. Prior to the release to fully support this, and each bird was ringed to identify it as adapts to life in the wild. And after, as this was a soft release, the birds took an opportunity to return to the breeding site to find food and water. However, this is evident. The new sources of fruit and variety insects were available. The immediate vicinity will provide a few healthy diets for these birds and offspring. And in 2014, there were 3 releases, and actually they were supported by Dr. Jane Goodall in June, who assisted with the release of starlings. And the last sort of big bit about these starlings and what they've been doing, we'll actually have a look at that one. Oh, you're going to climb on that perch? Let's see, he's sitting on the perch there. In 2017, there was another, the Bingwan Foundation decided to concentrate its programs and the Melita Kabold in Ubud. The community-based conservation program began in the village in late 2017, providing local residents with the opportunity to breed these starlings, and they were able to release F2 generation offspring within 2 years, and again in subsequent years. It had envisioned that the community will be responsible for the safety of the Bali starlings in the wild through serious monitoring and village traditional law enforcement. And the village officiated Oak, which is a local law, November 2018, which had been signed by the village head as well as the Killigans, or the heads of the village sections. And the local law states that shooting, trapping, or hunting the Bali starlings or any other protected wildlife in the area is prohibited, and any person in the community that is caught doing it will pay a penalty of 10 million rupees. The Foundation also released a number of starlings in late 2018, creating a wild flock of Bali starlings in the village, which is protected by the community, and it's hoped the soft release will give offspring the chance to reproduce in the wild, and the program of ecotourism can develop to provide income to the village. Along with these community-based programs, the Foundation's Breeding and Release Centre is now actually centred in Baja Bingwan, one of the districts of the village, and the centre is open to local community and to the general public. So that'd be quite cool to go visit if you ever go to Bali. As I might have to plan a Bali trip. Yeah, very, very cool. Very interesting story of conservation, and because people love these beautiful birds, and it's kind of hard to balance. People want to make money, and but we want to save these birds, but people want to earn a living, so that's kind of a hard thing to balance. But anyway, we're going to carry on. Next up, we've got the red leashway, and I don't know which actually subspecies this is. Let's see if you actually put. Oh, this is nominate subspecies, which is good. So this is the red leashway, or sometimes just called the leashway. So the leashway, or the southern leashway, which is also known as the southern leashway or the red leashway, these guys are an antelope that are found in the wetlands of South Central Africa. So these guys range from Botswana, Zambia, southeastern Democratic Republic of the Congo, northern Namibia, in eastern Angola, particularly in the Okavango Delta, Kafule Flats, and the Bagamoyo wetlands. And the species is actually very common in zoos and wildlife animal farms. Adult leachway tend to stand about 90 to 100 centimeters tall, about 35 to 39 inches, and they're at the shoulders, and they generally weigh between 50 to 120 kilograms, about 110 to 260 pounds, with males generally, of course, being larger than the females. So you can see this is our male, quite a big boy. Let's see if we can find one of our girls. There's a girl. So there's one of our girls there. Males are also darker in colour. They're typically golden brown with white bellies, but males are darker in colour. But the exact hue and amount of blackish on the front legs, chest, and body varies between the different subspecies. The long and spiral horns are vaguely lyre shape, you can see on the male there, and are borne only by the males. And the hindlimbs are actually somewhat longer in proportion than the antelopes, which actually suggests that these guys are quite well adapted for long distance running on marshy soils. So in terms of habitats, the leshway is found in marshy areas where it's an important herbivore of aquatic plants, as well as grasses that are found in flooded meadows. They typically use knee-deep water to protect themselves from predators, and their legs are covered in a water-repellent substance, which allows them to run quite fast in knee-deep water. They're also diurnal and will gather in herds that can include thousands of individuals. And herds are all usually of one sex, but during the mating season, they mix, similar to a lot of other antelope species. We'll actually find the male again as we talk about the other ones. Is that him? There he is. He's quite pretty, isn't he? Alright. So there is a couple different subspecies of the leshway. This is the common red leshway, or Clobus leshway. They are widely distributed from the wetlands of Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, and Zambia. There are a few other subspecies, the Kafuli Flats leshway, which is, I think, Gaboy made a mod of that one. There's also the Roberts leshway, which was found in northeastern Zambia but is now considered extinct, and the black leshway, which is found in the Bangweolo region of Zambia. And there's a couple other subspecies or PCVs of leshway that are known as well. Yeah, let's have a look at the male, the baby here. Where's the baby? There's the baby, like the baby. Let's go. So this little guy is a baby one. So leshway mate during the raining seasons of November to February, and they have a gestation period of about 7 to 8 months. So the majority of the calves are typically born from July to September. And although rare, there have been hybrids observed between the leshway and waterbuck. So it's quite interesting there. Very interesting observation there. Yeah, very, very cool. Do quite like the leshway. This one was done by Sky Polaris, and the Barley Miner was done by Great Cakes Mods. You know, that one's always a winner. I like you can always tell the Great Cakes mod by, how it looks, because it always looks amazing. But yeah, these leshways are really, really cool though. Really, really awesome. So next up, we're going to be moving on to some extinct animals. This one's also done by ElessarPZ. So this is another extinct Australian megafauna. Well, not technically megafauna, but a very large Australian animal. This is the giant koala, or also called the scientific name is Phalaroptos stratoni. So these guys are a relative of the modern koala. They're extinct. They're an arboreal marsupial from Australia that lived during the Pleistocene. It's quite recent. Phalaroptos stratoni was about a third larger than the modern koala, which is Cineris, and would have been the weights of about 13 kilograms, or about 29 pounds, which is about the same weight as a large male koala. So even though it will be on average quite a lot larger. Although they're considered part of the extinct Australian megafauna, typically megafauna is defined by being like 40 kilograms or more. It's the two kind of main ways people use megafauna is either 40 kilograms or up to a ton, or an animal that's over a ton is megafauna. If using that logic, human would be considered megafauna if we used 40 kilograms. But its body mass excludes it, but it is better described as a more robust, larger species of koala rather than a giant. In contrast to things like Procoptodon, which we covered last episode, and Diprotodon, one we've other covered recently, they were basically giant in every regard, quarter of a ton. The Diprotodon was up to 2 tons, massive animal, rhino-sized, even not compared to its relatives, but it's still quite a large animal compared to its relative. Probably an average one would be about the size of a large male koala today. The two species did actually coexist during the Pleistocene. They occupied the same arboreal niche, and the reasons for their extinction of the larger of the two is unknown, but we'll get into that a little bit sooner. So in terms of taxonomy, the species was first described or published by Alan Bartholomew in 1968. based on a partial maxilla with remains of teeth, which were uncovered by Cement Mills limestone quarry near Gore in Queensland. The material itself was determined to have been from Pleistocene horizon at the site, and the author arranged the species, or assigned the species as genus of the extinct koala as Phesoarctos strathoni, which is the species name honors the American professor R.A. Stritton, who is actually quite a famous marsupial paleontologist, which is interesting as well. The giant koala was an arboreal marsupial, weighed about 13 kilograms, which is a little bit larger than modern koalas. It is the largest known tree-dwelling marsupial to have lived, and scientists say there is a clear similarity between the physical appearance of Citroni and the modern koala, and it assumes that the giant koala is basically like a modern koala, a folivore which is specialized when feeding on eucalyptus leaves. Though, eucalyptus is still quite common, there's got to be some niche partitioning there. I imagine they probably prefer different species, or probably a bit more generalist or something like that, to help avoid competing. In terms of extinction, fossils of the species were discovered in Lake Erie and Lake Talarulu basins in South Australia. It was once also thought that the modern koala was actually descended from the species, but has now been determined to be incorrect. And Gilbert Price of the University of Queensland used improved dating techniques to analyse the fossils of both types of koala to find that two species were actually living together in the same arboreal niche, so they definitely lived together. It's unclear from what koalas descend, or which species or why one species survived and the other didn't. But the main reason is hypothesized is a restriction of food supply, but would have basically been their extinction based on climate change. Another potential reason is human hunting, particularly on larger animals like these guys, so that it would have affected the megafauna. We kind of went on about this last week or last episode with Procoptodon. Very similar situation here. We don't know exactly what happened in the Pleistocene extinction of Australia. Probably was a lot more climate, but these guys would have been a good snack. But the dwarfing hypothesis based on similarities between the two koalas has actually been used to support both ideas. So it's really undecided how these guys technically went extinct. Yeah, very, very cool. I do nice to see slightly different koala. Next up, this was done by ElessarPZ. Next up, the rest of these mods are all Great Cakes mods, so we're going to get stuck into that. We've got here, this is another extinct animal, so let's have a look at you. Very, very cool. So this is Cyanessa, which means dog coyote in Greek. These guys are an extinct genus of Procyanid. So Procyanid basically includes, raccoons, coatis, and stuff like that. Those kind of animals. And these come from the late Miocene to middle Pleistocene of South America. So fossils of these guys have been found in Argentina, Uruguay, Bolivia, and Venezuela, with the oldest known well-dated fossils from these guys coming about 7.3 million years ago. Most fossils, though, come from the late Miocene to early late Pliocene in age, but a single specimen, the Pleistocene specimen, the holotype, and the only known specimen of Siena minerale, which is what the species is. So this is the latest species, kind of the latest and the greatest, indicate that members of the genus would have made it to about 0.99, basically a million years ago. So this is Mirani, I believe that's the right species. Let's quickly check. Yeah, Mirani. So this is the latest species that lived in the Pleistocene. These guys are the oldest known terrestrial carnivoran from South America and actually represent the earliest undisputed southward mammal migrants as part of the Great American Biotic Interchange. So these guys appear in the fossil record much earlier than other North American immigrant groups, which do not appear until 3 million years ago, including other carnivorans, many of which did not appear in South America during the early Pleistocene. So the next oldest group of carnivorans that actually managed to get to South America were things like Lycanpelix and Glacidus, so those kind of dogs and stuff, which was about 3 million years ago, which was another 4 million years after the Procyonids like these guys actually managed to get to South America. And the ancestors of this guy, we don't know how they got there, but we suspect they would have been island hopping before the formation of the Panama. As we know, there is raccoons and stuff living on islands and stuff, so these guys were probably the best adapted species, and were already, being tropical, were probably well adapted to the environment at the time. They would have been island hopping and then managed to get to South America. So the South America that Cyanosaura kind of lived in uh, was in South America, where ecosystems were actually still dominated by Megatherian carnivorans, mainly Cyprasodonts and carnivorous opossums. Things like Thylacophila, stuff like that. Unlike most Cyprasodonts, which are hypercarnivorous, these guys are actually omnivorous, like modern raccoons and coatis. So that would have mean they wouldn't directly compete with them. And this is thought to be one possible reason why Canosura and his close relatives were able to colonize South America millions of years before these other, carnivorans like, cats and dogs and stuff like that. And other predators, which was much smaller than most prosonoids, and these guys were larger and would have kind of filled in a niche that was unoccupied in South American ecosystems. And, Teratons and Terrabirds, they were hypercarnivores as well, so these guys didn't really have to compete. We'll have a look at the cute little baby there. Got to have a look at the cute little baby. Canosura was actually much larger than any extant living prosoonid, weighing about 15 to 25 kilograms, about the same size of a small to medium-sized dog. However, it was much smaller than its later relative, if you guys maybe heard of this animal, Chapelanania, which is basically size of a small bear, which is quite funny as well. Chapelamania is thought to have been closely related to the species, and the two genera are frequently referred to as the Cyano group Prosonoids. And Chapelamania was actually thought to be evolved from a species of these guys, with these guys actually potentially being paraphyletic, which means they're actually not that closely related to each other. So there may be some, genetic taxonomic work on them in the future. But what we know about these guys, we'll actually pick another one because there's a few different colors you can get. Let's see if you can get one with a slightly different colour. We'll have a look at you, because you look quite nice there. So limb bones of Cyanosaura suggested the genus was pretty generalist. It was a terrestrial mammal with some capability of digging and climbing, similar to raccoons and coatis. Fossils of Cyanosaura have been found in fossil burrows that have been thought to have been made by the large armadillo Regalinia, and later occupied by this species. And the teeth as well suggest it was omnivorous, though it was more carnivorous than modern living procyanoids, but less carnivorous than modern ringtails. So it's kind of like a hypercarnivorous raccoon, but it still was an omnivore at the end of the day. But yeah, it's very, very cool. In between a raccoon and a ringtail, because ringtails, eat a lot of small animals. Yeah, very, very cool. Definitely a big fan of all these. And I've got to say, these little babies are very, very cute. Another great cakes mod banger, of course. Alright, so next up, we've got another extinct species from South America. This one's technically from Cuba. This one is the Cuban howler monkey, or Paleolata, can't even say the full scientific name yet. So it's Paleolata, let me check. Paleolata marinae, I think it is. Let me check quickly. Varanti. Okay, that's Varanti. There's two different species in this genus. So let's look on the camera. Okay, so this is a really cool one. This is Paraulata, which is a genus of New World monkey that contains two species of primate that are actually found in Cuba. So this main species we're talking about is Varalani. These were described by a nearly complete cranium from late Quaternary, or basically the end of the Ice Age of 1991. These cranium and number of isolated teeth and postcranial bones were found in the Cerro de Mono cave site in the Rio province. And the initial description of this cranium actually included the proposal that this monkey was actually a close relative of the howler monkeys. So that's where it's kind of got the name, the Cuban howler monkey here. Based on analysis of its cranium. But taxonomic, as taxonomy be taxonomy, looking at the teeth, it actually suggests that instead of being a relative of a howler monkey, other species of Caribbean monkeys, such as Xenothyris, Encelocebus, and Encelothyryx, these guys would have formed their own monophyletic clade or a clade of their own of Caribbean monkeys, and those would have been convergent evolution. So this is basically like a convergent howler monkey, which I think is very, very interesting. And they would have entered the Caribbean during the Oligocene-Miocene boundary, and they put these three species in a group called Xenotyrrhini, However, more recent research actually restores its closer relationship with Elatura, and the postcranial morphology of the species suggests it was partly terrestrial and kind of an example of island gigantism, since it was a little bit bigger than most other species, since Palatura was estimated to be about 8.4 kilograms or 19 pounds. And based on that, semi-terrestrial and making it the most terrestrial of its relatives. So it would have been living on the ground a lot more, being kind of a large herbivore, kind of in the island of Cuba. There is another species. The second species was from the late, basically the early Miocene, and was the largest neotropical primate known from that epoch. But these guys, as I mentioned, actually are. So we thought they were their own group, but turns out, looking at more recent research, they're actually a type of howler monkey, which I think is really, really cool. It's kind of, we go roundabouts, which is really cool. And it's really cool reconstruction. I really like this reconstruction. All the different colors and stuff like that. And they've got, of course, a really cute little baby. How can you not love that? Anyway, we're going to move on. This is certainly, but the one of the coolest, really cool animal. We get to see more monkeys. We've always been asking for more monkeys, but here we've got the Venezuelan howler monkey. So this is not Para atula. This is an actual genuine kind of atula species of Cinculatus. So this is the Cuban howler monkey, or the Cuban, Colombian or Venezuelan howler monkey. These guys are South American species of howler monkey, which is a type of New World monkey, and these guys are found in the western Amazon basin, in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Brazil. The population in Santa Cruz in Bolivia was actually split off to be a different species, the Bolivian red howler in 1986, but more recently splitting off the population northeastern Trinidad as a Guianan red howlers has also occurred. So these guys are kind of they were all lumped, but now they're becoming different species. So sexual dimorphism in this species is actually quite small, unlike a lot of monkeys. So the Venezuelan howler monkey or red howler is males typically get between 49 to 72 centimeters and female from about 46 to 57 centimeters long. The males weigh between 5.4 and 9 kilograms, while the females weigh 4.2 to 7 kilograms. And they have quite a long prehensile tail, as you can see there, that is about 75 centimeters long on average. Essentially 49 to 75 centimeters. The tail is covered in fur, and the only parts that aren't are kind of the under part of the last third, which is actually used to grab branches. The colors of both males and females are deep reddish brown, and they actually change shade as they age, and their faces are surrounded by fur, and they have stubby noses. The jawbone of the red howler monkey is also quite large, especially in the body and mandible, and the position of the foramen is very posterior, which means they have a very large, hyoid bone and jaw, which allows them to make them, very large boomings, howling calls that they make. This is an adaptation they share with other howler monkeys. So these guys are diurnal, so they come out during the day, and they are quite arboreal, spending much of their time in the canopy. Its preferred method of locomotion is a quadrupedal walking with minimal leaping. And its long prehensile tail also assists in providing support and grappling. In addition, the hands and feet have a grasping pattern that allows it to better move through the trees. This can be seen by the wide separation of the second and third digits on the hands. You can see quite a wide separation there. So these guys live in social groups of about 3 to 9 individuals, about 5 to 7. And these groups are polygamous, with only 1 or 2 males and the rest being females and their offspring. One male is usually dominant, the alpha male, and is responsible to lead the other monkeys to grab food, find food, and he's in charge of defending them. The females of the group are in charge of their offspring. Venezuelan red howlers are most active during the morning, when the group are on the move to find another feeding spot. The howlers are famous for their dawn chorus, and their roaring and howling calls are formed mostly by the males of the group, and these roars can be heard up to 5 kilometers away in the forest, and makes their presence known in the area. They also use to prevent confrontations between groups, which will prevent energy loss and avoid physical fighting. So basically, it's an early warning system. Because of their low sugar diets, conservation of energy is key, and they also help. This also help in the scattering of the groups and lessens the competition for food. So these guys are folivores, which means they eat mainly leaves, but they also eat nuts, small animals, fruits and seeds, and flowers, which are important nutrients as well. These flowers provide sugar necessary. These foods provide sugar necessary for growth and energy. And the most important part of their diet is leaves, which they cannot live out without for more than a week. They eat both older and younger leaves. However, the older leaves do provide more nutrition. And these howler monkeys are able to eat the fibrous leaves due to the structural aspects of their dentition. So they have narrow incisors that aid the ingestion of the leaves, and molars with sharp shearing crests that help them to better chew their food. And in addition as well, they do have complex stomachs that actually allow them to aid the digestive process, with the hindgut and large intestines helping with that, as the hindgut contains bacteria that allows them to digest. And this actually makes up a third of the volume of the Venezuelan red howler's total body volume. And like other New Wood monkeys, they have 2 incisors, 1 canine, 3 premolars, and 3 molars. So in terms of reproduction, the fierce sexual competition between males is actually due to an imbalanced sex ratio. We'll actually look at them, find another one there. We'll have a look at one of the babies. One of the babies here. So the female tricks males by moving her tongue around to initiate mating. If the male does not respond, she then moves on to another mate. The average gestation period is about 190 days, and the infant will stay with its mother for about 18 to 24 months, so about 2 years. After males reach sexual maturity, they are expelled from their natal group, and the male must then invade a foreign group. There, the male gives off the other leader and whatever offspring the first leader sired. So very much like lions, they do infanticide. By doing this, the male kills any possible competition, in less than 25% of offspring survive male invasions. And there are considered a few different subspecies. There's the Colombian red howler, the Ursine howler, and the Juran howler, which are sometimes considered a different species as well. But yeah, really, really cool. I do love to see more monkeys. You know, that's one of the big things that I think the base roster of Planet Zoo did lack, a lot of monkeys, but luckily we got a lot of monkeys now. But yeah, I think this is a great place to finish. So I'm going to thank everyone. So thank you, Eliza, for the stilt and the giant koala. Thank you, Sky Polaris, for the red leashway. And thank you, Great Cakes Mod, for the barley miner, the Cuban howler, the Venezuelan howler, and the basically prehistoric pilmati. So yeah, really, really appreciate that, and I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to get the little bell icons to get notified for anything. So if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.